Introduction. The Yogi. People behave unethically all the time, but the rich and powerful tend to get away with it far more often than most. This book gets real about the inner workings of the privileged and famous and what happens when a pure lamb lives amongst the wolves, which happens every day in Hollywood. Each chapter dives into a different character, with most names changed, who acted in ways so shockingly selfish and narcissistic, it'll leave you questioning how these people ever made it to the top. Until you realize that that's exactly how they made it there. We'll dive into the character flaws and personality disorders that drive people like them, how to deal with them, and maybe, just maybe, we all have traces of those traits that could use a little reflection. Each chapter will close with insightful lessons we can all learn from, because the truth isn't just about exposing others. It's about recognizing the parts of ourselves that need growth too. I believe it's healthy to approach every lesson from both sides of the coin, so I'll get real on my end while calling out the posers on theirs. By the end, you'll have tips to navigate your life with clearer vision and a stronger sense of self. Like many, I was born with diverse and extraordinary talents, natural beauty, profound insight, exceptional creativity, effortless athleticism, while holding a heart of gold and uniquely an unshakable connection to organic spirituality, refusing to bow to the demands and absurdities of today's modern world. A world obsessed with superficiality, consumerism, and chasing empty promises. I was highly valued for being a refreshingly real person in a world full of posers and opportunists. But that shifted after I experienced a profoundly traumatic relationship. One so life-altering that my life and self-worth as I knew it crumbled, propelling me onto a path of deep inner healing, away from worldly pursuits and external validation. In that process, I inadvertently uncovered layers of unprocessed emotions from some early life traumas, dysfunctional developmental programs, and even traces of ancestral traumas I unknowingly carried. Our personal journeys are a unique blend of our natural talents, desires, and insights intertwined with the impact of our development and our past traumas. These powerful forces influencing and hindering each other throughout our lives. These contrasting energies shape our experiences, with moments of great expansion bumping up against unresolved resistance. Yet there was another disruptive factor in my mix, a sociopath with a knack for manipulation and brainwashing. It only takes one toxic person in our lives to alter our life's course, or knock down all the carefully placed dominoes we've built. I'll illustrate how this happened in my life and share insights on what to watch for. I view every scenario in my life from two perspectives. First, through the lens of the worldly chain of events, what occurred on the surface, in tangible actions and outcomes. This perspective helps me understand the relational, psychological, and situational aspects of my experiences. Secondly, the universal energetics at play, the unseen forces that shape these events on a deeper level. This perspective considers how global trends, karmic cycles, and ancestral influences contribute to what manifests in our lives. Metaphorically speaking, we humans are like a colony of ants, right? Busily navigating our lives within the confines of our hive, which, for this analogy, is inside a freight train car. Unaware of the bigger picture, we go about our daily lives, oblivious to the fact that unseen forces are affecting us, taking us to unknown destinations beyond our awareness or control. We believe our tiny world is everything, yet in reality, other forces are constantly at work shaping our experiences without us fully realizing it. The good egg. There was a time in my early adult life that felt organically powerful, as if all my stars were aligned. It was a time when I was teaching private yoga sessions to some of the biggest names in Hollywood, celebrities, producers, directors, musicians, as well as politicians, designers, and athletes. A lot of the movers and shakers in the world. Oh, and let's not forget a few wealthy and gossipy socialites. I thrived in this work, not only because I was exceptionally skilled as a yoga instructor, but because I genuinely cared about each of my clients' well-being. They called me a good egg, and I was. I often didn't realize they were famous or influential people. I simply saw them for who they truly were. I had no ulterior motive, nor did I ask for any special favors. At least initially, that is. Strike a gong for the ominous foreshadowing to Chapter 1, The Sociopath. Originally, my easygoing and compassionate personality naturally aligned with a career as a yoga instructor. Teaching felt effortless and authentic. However, when our lives burn brightly, they tend to attract people drawn to that light, not always for the right reasons. Some are motivated by self-interest, hoping to take what they can for themselves. Knowing this, celebrities have layers of protection, teams of people, to shield them from these opportunists. But as someone connected to these high-profile individuals, I didn't have those same barriers or understanding. I was left exposed, and that vulnerability opened the door for someone highly experienced with manipulative intent. I begin this book with The Sociopath in Chapter 1 because it marked this pivotal moment when my life and personality shifted in ways I was unable to control. This person had studied and developed mind control tactics, using them to intentionally manipulate. And even though my experience was extreme, we all encounter similar, more subtle dynamics, whether with manipulative people in our personal lives or authoritarian and corporate influences on a larger scale. It felt like I was watching the train of my life's purpose, something I had spent years building, derail in slow motion, as someone else hijacked my controls, destroying the very thing he desired in the process. As my personality changed, so did my relationships, most for the worse. I could no longer tolerate even the slightest toxic behavior from others, leaving me without the emotional bandwidth to care for others as I once had. In search of relief from the emotional discomfort and the newfound insecurities that I was experiencing, I began saying yes to opportunities more impulsively, hoping for a quick way out of the pain and back to a sense of inner security, back to the life I had known before. That set the stage for the events in chapters 2 through 7, as I navigated through a series of unethical experiences before finally finding the strength to take back control and begin the healing process. It's important to be clear that although I was compromised from the sociopath's abuse, the subsequent characters in this book knowingly chose to take advantage of my vulnerability at the time, acting with unethical and selfish intent. Their actions were deliberate, and my compromised condition does not excuse or justify their behavior. It has taken me 15 years to get to this point, and the work is still ongoing. Healing is not a linear process, but a continuous journey, full of twists and turns. Regaining control of my life and rediscovering my authentic self required patience, persistence, and a deep reconnection to the anchor of who I once knew myself to be. It wasn't about becoming someone new, but rather peeling back the layers of habitual brainwashing that had altered my life. However, with every step forward, I gained valuable insights, not just about myself, but also about how to help others on their paths to living most authentically. Well before this sociopath entered my life, I approached everything I did with pure intentions, opting for an organic approach to life, trusting that the right paths and people would align in their own time. I've had an almost allergic reaction to anything superficial. Marketing? Ugh. The idea of using predictable, in-your-face tactics to sell something just makes my skin crawl. My philosophy has always been, if people want what I'm offering, they'll find me. For one, I'm not about to beg for attention. And two, it feels selfish to yank people's focus away from their own lives just to get a spotlight on mine. What if they were like me, allowing their lives to unfold naturally, in the moment? Well, fat chance of that. I soon realized how very rare I was in this regard, even if I didn't fully understand the developmental reasons behind this easygoing, surrendered way of life. The superficial generation. I believe that the forced down our throats, quote, popularity, end quote, of a specific, with a K, reality show hijacked an entire generation. The rise of social media, combined with this family's superficial assault on the world, transformed this promising millennial generation into one with increasingly superficial tendencies. The show became more like keeping up with narcissists, staring at their filtered, photoshopped, and surgically enhanced reflections in the river, where they began to believe the very delusions crafted by their own marketing teams, managers, producers, and plastic surgeons. Then they demanded that we believe it too. The worst part? The fake manufactured appearance of, quote, success, end quote, sold their sham to the susceptible youth, who then took the same means hoping for the same result. Boom! A superficial epidemic, just like that. It seems that people are far more determined to project their lies than they are to persuade others of their truths. Superficial people tend to be starved for security, like plants without roots, blown wherever the wind takes them. On the other hand, a person with depth is deeply rooted in their purpose and who they are. So staying grounded to my authenticity has always been my priority, even in a world filled with endless pop-ups teasing the next big thing. Luckily, I had already seen firsthand that there truly is no, quote, big thing, end quote. And that's my message to you. It's time to open the windows to let the smoke out and break the mirrors that deceive you into believing otherwise. Your life is far more important than filtered, fake, gaslit celebrity life, and it's waiting for your attention. For about 10 years, I watched and partook in from the sides the glittering life of fame and fortune. During this time, my passion for wellness had morphed into a brand, which was on trend, and this passion aligned with my purpose. I starred in a nationally best-selling DVD in the fitness category. I designed a gorgeous activewear line. I was writing inspirational books, leading retreats worldwide, and I invented the world's first yoga doll collections. The opportunities were rolling in: infomercials, reality show deals, licensing offers, all ready to slap my brand name on mass-produced garbage that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. So, after far too many negative experiences with the groomers, the charlatans, the posers, the desperate housewives, and puppet masters, I began to say no and do less. I refused to compromise my authentic essence and business for the sake of fame and wealth. I turned down opportunities, even from some of the most influential people in the world, while working to forge a path that went against the mainstream direction society was pushing at a ferocious pace. One thing I can say with absolute certainty, I've lived true to who I am in every way that I've known, and in my opinion, at the end of our lives, that is what will matter most. In Chapter 8, I explore the healing work that led me through these experiences, back to who I truly am. It's never too late to be you. I believe there's no more powerful act that we can take than to live true to who we are. This always reminds me of the powerful quote by Mohadessa Najumi. "The woman who does not require validation from anyone is the most feared individual on the planet." Remember, energy is everything. Integrity. Here's the thing. I'm a bit stubborn about integrity. If it's not natural, I'm not interested. I can smell if a person has integrity or if they don't, like a wolf in the wild. And let me tell you, it hasn't exactly made me the most popular person in the room. I've clashed with my own yoga community more times than I can count, mainly because I couldn't stomach their performative spirituality, ego-fueled hypocrisy, conspiracy theory delusions, topped with empty buzzwords. It's so love and light of me, eh? But it turns out being real just makes some people uncomfortable, especially in a world where image is everything. Again, I could have sold out. I could have bought fake followers, fake likes, fake reviews, the whole fake package. I could have handed over my rights to publishers who would have reshaped my story into something more marketable. I could have starred in the cheesy reality shows and licensed my brand for more cheap plastic garbage. No thanks. Instead, I stayed real, sticking to what I know is true, fumbles and all, no matter how slow or unglamorous the roads might have been, because I knew they were true. You see, I'm a deeply spiritual person navigating a vastly and increasingly superficial world. Can you relate? My life has been filled with extraordinary experiences wrapped in rich synchronicity, which makes the mundane human experience just incomparable. My soul is of the greatest value to me, not manufacturing toxic nylon yoga leggings. Origin. I've illustrated that I'm fascinated by truth and authenticity, but also by origins, by where things begin, how ideas are born, the spark that ignites creativity, as well as the subsequent evolution of that spark that follows. Inspiration is a natural part of being human, and we are all innocently influenced by the world around us. However, there is a vast difference between being inspired by something and claiming an origin that isn't ours, or worse, outright stealing someone else's innovations, which happens every day in our modern world. As yogis, we are taught to honor the source of our teachings and our inspiration, giving thanks to each teacher and guru that came before us. This practice instills a mindset of humility and accountability. For me, both origin and inspiration are sacred, reminding me that I am part of a much bigger, interconnected picture. Without this awareness, it becomes all too easy for individuals to fall into the ego-driven illusion that they alone are the source, that they themselves are God. I often think of origin with the visual of a pebble striking the surface of a pond. The moment of impact is the origin, and every ripple that follows carries the intention and energy of that initial action, with its own inspiration and journey. But the ripples are not disconnected from the source. When, like ancient yogis, we respect the origin, we amplify its power, just like those ripples carrying the purpose of that first pebble across the surface of the water. I believe it's important to distinguish between organic action, those decisions and movements that arise naturally from within, and actions that are inspired or influenced by external sources. Inspiration from external sources requires discernment. We must pause and ask ourselves whether we are truly inspired, meaning the idea resonates deeply with our values and purpose, or if we are being subtly driven by ego or competition to replicate someone else's path. This discernment requires honesty, checking in with ourselves to ensure our actions are aligned with who we are, rather than a reaction to someone else's influence or wanting what someone else has. Knowing when to embrace inspiration and when to honor it as it is key to maintaining integrity. And when we act with truthfulness, whether that source is internally organic or externally inspired, the result will feel more authentic. The evolution of morality. Since we're diving into the bad habits of the rich and powerful, it's helpful to zoom out for a moment and consider the bigger picture, the historical shifts and moral objectives that humankind have strived for over the millennia. We're trying to be good people, but truthfully, we're still very much a work in progress. It's only been about 2,500 years since the birth of democracy in Athens, and that's barely a blink in the timeline of human history. We've made significant strides in governing systems and moral philosophy, but the ongoing struggles between power, wealth, and ethical responsibility show that humanity's collective moral compass is far from true north. Many religious and philosophical traditions formalized moral principles, creating distinctions between right and wrong, or good and bad behavior. For example, Confucianism, Buddhism, Judaism, yoga, and Greek philosophies, just to name a few, each emphasized compassion, justice, and a collective good for all people. Of course, you probably can't find a more iconic example of moral conduct than Moses' 10 Commandments, principles designed to govern the people he led through the desert for 40 years. I, too, would have created some rules if I were leading the same group of people around for that long. A few hundred years later, the Upanishads detailed how to cultivate righteousness, which evolved into yoga's 8-limbed path. However, about 900 AD, the vastly increasing spread of Christianity began to alter moral landscapes across Europe. In addition, our means of maintaining written records had advanced to advertise these concepts more easily to greater groups of people. Christian teachings encouraged kindness, humility, and service to others. Naturally, these teachings spread even further after the 1400s thanks to the invention of the printing press. So, why do some people feel compelled to act morally and others do not? And why is it that the latter are the ones who seem to, quote, win, end quote, the most worldly gains? A few months ago, I began diving into a variety of documentaries detailing topics around Stalin's rise to power, Hitler's rise to power, and Hitler's political tactics, Mayan spiritual practices, and the bloodthirsty, ruthless conquests of the Vikings and Romans. You see, before this widespread popularity of Christianity, Buddhism, and yoga, moral conduct was mostly influenced by cultural beliefs. So, like how groups and tribes lived amongst each other. Morality was rooted in honor and the appeasement of their particular gods. Human sacrifice, war, and conquest, which seem barbaric to us today, were common practices for many of these cultures, especially Viking, Roman, and Aztec. Murder was simply part of life, and it wasn't unusual for people to kill a family member to climb social ladders, take slaves, torture, or rob the poor without facing any consequences, let alone feeling any sense of guilt or wrongdoing. Now, regardless of religion or personal beliefs, it's fascinating to trace these global shifts in morality with the popular rise of both Buddhism and Christianity, with the latter introducing a new burden of guilt and moral anxiety, creating an ethical bar for repentance. This transformed how societies recognized and punished right from wrong. I bring this up because many prominent figures throughout history, past and present, even those like Vladimir Putin, who proudly touts himself as Christian, have continued to act from barbaric and self-serving mindsets, driven by the same impulses to conquer and control, even if their faith outwardly rejects these acts. They lie, cheat, murder, and steal without batting an eyelid, let alone feel any remorse. Yet, hypocritically, they demand that the people act in accordance with their governance and laws or be punished for their crimes. The Vikings were barbaric, thriving on conquest and the glory of battle. To them, the most honorable death was one met in combat, securing a coveted place in Valhalla. Interestingly, we can see echoes of this diluted mindset in modern-day jihadist ideologies, where acts of terror are driven by a similarly distorted sense of honor and afterlife reward. Either common men were brainwashed into believing these things so that their leaders could ensure strong armies for their personal objectives, or each individual justified their barbaric acts by convincing themselves that they were serving a higher purpose. In my opinion, the Vikings' impressive reputation for conquest may have contributed to the later distorted Nazi ideal of their, quote, Aryan, end quote, elitist race, which included similar physical features: tall, strong, fair hair, fair skin. Between the 8th and 11th centuries, the Vikings migrated into what is now modern-day Germany and Poland, crossing the southern shores of the Baltic Sea. These people who settled there contributed to the development of Germanic ideals, which eventually fed into the very German nationalism that inspired Nazism. Mind you, the original concept of an Aryan people actually stems from Indian and Iranian references to noblemen from the Middle East, having nothing to do with the fair hair and light skin traits that the Germans later adopted. But Hitler wasn't known for being an honest historian. He heavily distorted historical interpretations to serve his political agenda. Follow along with my train of thought here. I believe that the influence of this fair-haired, new Aryan race may have played a role in shaping the later concept of what we know as being all-American. I'm not taking any political stance whatsoever. I'm simply trying to understand how we've arrived at where we are today, where specific appearances and superficial presentations have evolved into a massive advertising ideal used to sell everything from lip gloss to blind adoration. It's fascinating and a little unnerving to see how deeply ingrained superficiality has become in shaping our desires, our destinies, and beliefs, and even our sense of belonging in the world. But can we trust the source of this ideal? This all-American appeal, in many ways, can be seen as a modern expression of the same underlying forces that have fueled white supremacy for centuries. Although it's dressed in subtler tones today, it still serves to privilege specific individuals, particularly those who fit the mold of being blonde, good-looking, and physically fit. Individuals who embody this all-American image tend to receive preferential treatment, consciously or unconsciously. Throughout history, authoritarian leaders have used this image, as well as other specific strategies of misinformation, to harness power from the masses. Somehow, basic principles of service to the people and lead by example often get buried underneath personal agendas and a hunger for power, where the people of democracies are fed lies in order to ensure their compliance and support. Since people have a subconscious desire to belong, to be part of the quote in, end quote, crowd, many feel safer aligning with a powerful figure, even if that person is an unethical bully, because it provides an illusion of protection. I call this mass Stockholm syndrome. The fear of losing perceived advantages to lesser races fuels blind allegiance to this bully, driving people to compromise their morals, all for the comfort of fitting into that illusion of an elite class and securing what they have been led to believe is rightfully theirs. Again, turning a blind eye to the leader's actual intentions or behaviors. What I'm trying to convey with all of this is that these ruthless, self-serving, and gaslighting actions of the powerful have been entrenched in our society since the dawn of humanity, stemming from our primal animalistic instincts. Instead of pledging loyalty to the alpha male in our pack, or rallying behind victorious armies in ancient battle formations, we now channel these same primal passions, fears, and allegiances when cheering for the dominant team at the Super Bowl or backing a candidate in a presidential race. We feel safer aligning with a fiercest fighter, not necessarily the most ethical or democratic. However, my stance and my belief is that we need to evolve beyond these primal tendencies if we are to survive as a species, if we ever want to see our communities living honestly, in peace amongst each other, and in harmony with nature. Truth is not subjective. It's the foundation upon which reality is built, and truth requires that each of us develop the courage to see things as they are, not as we wish them to be or how we've been fooled to believe. So without further ado, let's dive into the unethical behaviors of the everyday posers and predators running rampant in our societies today, using these same self-serving forces of ancient conquerors and the same greedy tactics for power, except now they're hidden behind computer screens, masked by polished images, and armed with manipulation and unethical schemes. How many of these posers preach environmentalism from their private jets? Or kindness after berating their staff? Or how about humanitarianism while stealing from their yoga teachers? It's time to get real and stop giving our attention to these posers. To do so, you and I have to be astute in seeing through their bullshit and illusions. You see, these superficial, hypocritical posers, abusers, and predators, they come in every form imaginable. They might be in your family, at work, on your dating app, or running for local office, including all parties. They could be business owners, neighbors, teachers, lawyers, priests, yoga teachers, or even police officers. Immoral, selfish tendencies arise from a combination of our development and genetics. These egoistic tendencies have simply evolved into the narcissists and sociopaths of our modern world. And trust me, you are far wiser and safer knowing their tactics than staying in the dark. Take a moment to examine who you follow and admire. Are you overlooking questionable behavior? If so, you're not alone. People often turn a blind eye to narcissistic behavior, buying into these carefully curated images due to their charisma and polished public personas, individual self-doubt, social pressure to fit in, fear of repercussions, denial, or even personal benefit from the association. What would happen if you started living true to what you genuinely feel is right, calling out the posers and the abusers while choosing a life of conscious morality? As we step into the dawn of AI-driven content dominating our world, it is equally wise to sharpen our ability to discern reality from deception. So join me in this call to keep it real. Future generations depend on us.